Ever catch yourself just spacing out for a minute, and then suddenly it's like, hold on, was I even conscious just now?
It's a question for the ages.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like our brains are these black boxes, even to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we are cracking open that mystery
Ooh.
with Michael Graziano's Consciousness and the Social Brain.
Such a good one.
So get ready for some serious aha moments.
And prepare to have your assumptions challenged, because Graziano doesn't just rehash that age-old philosophical debate.
Right.
He dives right into the mechanics, the nitty-gritty of how our brains might actually create the feeling of awareness.
I love that he compares it to figuring out a magician's trick.
Yes.
Like, we see the illusion, right? But Graziano wants to show us the trapdoors and the smoke and mirrors behind it all.
Yeah.
And the core of his theory is this wild idea, the attention schema.
Okay.
So break that down for us. What is that exactly?
So think of it like a spotlight inside your head.
Okay.
Your brain uses it to kind of focus on what's important in the middle of all the noise of the world.
Right.
But here's the thing. Your brain doesn't just have that spotlight. It builds like a little mental model of it.
What?
And not even just your spotlight, but everyone else's too.
Wait, so it's like my brain is saying, okay, I'm shining my spotlight over here, and I bet she's focused on that over there, even if she's not consciously thinking about it.
Exactly.
Wow.
Graziano's argument is that this very act of modeling attention, of creating a little map of who's focusing on what, that's the foundation of consciousness itself.
Whoa, that's a lot to wrap your head around. So how does this actually play out in the real world?
Yeah.
Graziano uses this really cool example of the rubber hand illusion.
Oh, yeah.
You know that one, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a classic experiment that demonstrates just how malleable our sense of self can be.
Right.
And how easily our brains can be tricked.
It's seriously freaky.
It is.
You see a fake hand being stroked at the same time as your real hand.
Right.
And suddenly you start feeling like that rubber hand is part of your own body.
Wild.
So how does that tie back to the attention schema?
Well, it highlights how our brains build models. And not just of our attention, but our bodies, too.
Right.
We have this thing called a body schema that basically tells us where our physical self begins and ends. The rubber hand illusion works because your brain is trying to make sense of all this conflicting information.
Right.
And it updates its body schema based on what it's paying attention to.
So because I'm looking at the rubber hand and feeling the stroking in sync, my brain's like, well, that must be my hand then.
Yeah.
It overrides what I know logically.
Right.
That's wild.
It is wild, and it shows how our brains are constantly constructing our reality, not just passively reflecting it.
Right.
Our senses provide the raw data, but it's our attention, shaped by these internal models, that determines what we experience.
Wow. Okay, so we've talked about how our brains can be tricked into incorporating like external objects into our sense of self.
Yeah.
But what about those times when our internal experience itself seems to shift? I'm thinking about something else. Graziano talks about the extra-mission myth of vision.
Ah,
That almost instinctive feeling we have as kids, that we're shooting beams out of our eyes to see.
Right. Superman.
It sounds ridiculous as an adult, but I totally remember thinking that way.
Yeah.
Like my eyes were little flashlights illuminating the world.
It's funny, though, because it's not ridiculous at all when you think about it in terms of the attention schema.
Really?
Yeah, because we're not just passively receiving information.
Right.
We're actively directing our attention. We're focusing our spotlight on different aspects of our surroundings.
Okay.
So it makes sense that our brains would model that as something going outward from us.
It's like my brain is saying, I'm shining my spotlight over there, so of course that's what I see.
It's exactly.
It's not just about the eyes. It's about where I choose to focus.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And, you know, this attention-centric view of consciousness has some really intriguing implications for how we understand certain neurological conditions.
Okay.
Graziano talks about neglect syndrome, for instance.
That's where people with specific brain damage become completely unaware of one side of their visual field.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And it's not just that they can't see anything on that side.
Right.
It's like that entire half of their world just ceases to exist for them.
Really?
They don't just miss details. They don't even realize anything is missing.
So it's almost like their internal spotlight just stops shining on that entire side of their reality.
And that's what makes it so compelling in light of the attention schema theory.
Okay.
It suggests that this isn't just a visual processing issue.
Right.
It's a breakdown in the brain's ability to model attention to that neglected space.
So even if their eyes are sending perfectly good signals to the brain,
Yeah.
if that part of the brain responsible for building the attention schema is damaged,
Yeah.
then their conscious awareness of that area simply doesn't get constructed.
It just doesn't even enter their awareness. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a powerful example of how our experience of the world is actively shaped, not just passively received.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which, of course, leads us to some of the really big philosophical questions.
Yeah.
If consciousness is a construct of the brain, like Graziano argues, what does that mean for things like the soul or spirituality or even the idea of like a universal consciousness?
Right. These are questions that have been pondered for centuries.
Right.
And Graziano doesn't claim to have all the answers.
Sure.
But what he does offer is a new framework for thinking about them.
So he's not saying that spirituality is meaningless just because we can now point to specific mechanisms in the brain.
Not at all.
Okay.
He acknowledges that the attention schema theory, it stems from a scientific mechanistic view of the brain, but he's also clear that it doesn't negate the profound experiences and questions that fall under the umbrella of spirituality.
It's like saying, just because we understand the physics of light and sound waves doesn't make a symphony any less moving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The awe and wonder that we feel when we contemplate these things, our own awareness, the interconnectedness of life, those are still deeply meaningful experiences, even if we're beginning to understand the biological underpinnings.
Yeah. It's like we're getting this little glimpse behind the curtain of our own minds.
Right.
But the more we see, the more we realize how much more there is to uncover.
It's true.
And speaking of uncovering things, this whole idea of the attention schema, it has some pretty mind-blowing implications for artificial intelligence, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If consciousness is ultimately about building these models of attention,
Right.
as Graziano suggests,
Yeah.
then it really begs the question, could we build a machine that's capable of doing the same thing?
Right.
Could we, in a sense, create artificial consciousness?
Whoa, it's like that line between the science fiction and reality is getting blurrier all the time.
I know, right?
But even if we could build machines that could, like, mimic the attention schema, would they actually experience consciousness the way we do? Would they have that same feeling of awareness?
That's a question that goes way beyond the scope of what we can definitively answer right now.
Sure.
But it's definitely a question we need to be asking.
Right.
Especially, like you said, if we're talking about creating machines with, like, human-like intelligence, we really have to grapple with what that actually means,
Right.
both scientifically and ethically.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's a lot to ponder, but, diving into this book with you,
Yeah.
it's not just about understanding, like, the nuts and bolts of the brain.
Right.
It's making me actually appreciate the very ACT of experiencing the world.
I think that's the beauty of this kind of exploration,
Yeah.
You're taking something as fundamental as consciousness.
Right.
Something we just take for granted.
Here we are.
We're like dissecting it,
Yeah.
analyzing it. And in doing so, we're deepening our appreciation for just the sheer wonder of it all.
It's like we've gone from, how is this even possible? To, okay, here's one way it might work. And now we're left with this whole new set of even bigger questions.
Right.
It's incredibly exciting.
It is. And
Yeah.
that feeling, that sense of awe and ongoing discovery,
Yeah.
that's what makes this field so captivating.
Well said.
Thank you.
If you are as intrigued by all this as I am,
Yeah.
I highly recommend checking out Michael Graziano's Consciousness and the Social Brain yourself.
Definitely.
It is a thought-provoking read
Yeah.
that just might change the way you think about, well, thinking.
It might even spark some aha moments of your own, right?
Right. And on that note,
Yeah.
we will leave you with one final thought. If our brains are constantly constructing these models of attention, trying to figure out, like, where our focus is and why,
Yeah.
then what does it even mean to be truly conscious?
It's a great question.
Is it about expanding our attention, like becoming aware of not just what we're focusing on,
Yeah.
but how W and WHY we focus?
So interesting.
That's something to chew on until next time.
Definitely.
Keep those minds curious, everyone.